Rob, thanks very much for joining us on what might be broadcasting history for Wycombe Wanderers, actually. A video call here, 5,000 miles apart, bringing your information, your views to the Wycombe Wanderers supporters. First off, we're in lockdown over here in the UK. How are things over there in New Orleans?
No, we got a little jump on you. We actually went into it last week. We shut our law firm down a week ago yesterday morning. We're getting through it. We're unfortunately one of the hot spots in the U.S. in New Orleans, but we'll get through it. One of the things we have going for us, Matt, is that for better or for worse, we have a long history of dealing with disaster. Going back to Katrina, where Missy and I ended up with this house out in the country because of Katrina. But we'll get through it. I think we all will.
You're obviously missing a nephew. Pete is over here with us in the UK. We should address Pete. It is his birthday today. He's a long way from family, but I know a few people around the club have added some special touches to try and make it a memorable day for him. I'm sure he'll remember it one way or the other.
Well, I know he will, and I got to tell you, it breaks my heart. He and I have talked about it. He is totally committed to it, to being in Wycombe. I have my own personal misgivings about him staying there, but he's an adult. He made up his mind, and candidly, I think it's for the best. He's on the ground. He's able to translate, even though we all speak the same language. Sometimes there are nuances to Couhig speak that need to be interpreted, and he's on the ground to do it.
Okay, well, we'll cut straight to the questions then. We've had various questions that have come in by email and by Twitter as well. And the first one from Tom Hancock is very pertinent to the moment. How is the club planning for the inevitable loss of matchday revenue? And will League One and League Two owners work together to lobby the appropriate bodies for support at such a tough time?
If there is a bright spot in all of this, it's the fact that the League One and League Two owners are, in fact, working together. We have begun communicating as a group amongst each other, sort of a best practices, how are you going to proceed and the like. The second part of that question is, did you go away? Okay.
You're back again. We're
good. The second part of the question is, how are we doing financially? I have to tell you that Couhig luck has held one more time. If this had taken place 2 months ago before we had closed, it would have made closing almost impossible just because everything would be moving around. We're one of the few clubs in any league without any debt to speak of. I mean, we have some payables that you would expect on a month-to-month basis. We have a payroll that is in check. We have a player's payroll and a staffing payroll that's responsible. So we are set up, and if we don't play another game between now and the end of the season, and I'll get to that in a bit, we would be able to survive and not prosper and not do some of the things we want to do, but certainly everybody would know that the Wycombe Wanderers will be around next year as well.
We had 3 questions from Jeremy. The first one, where do you think right now that the squad, the organisation and the fan base should all be directing their efforts to help the community over the coming weeks?
I think everybody wants to go out and do something. What makes this particular crisis so unique is that the best thing you can do is almost nothing. Stay home, stay safe, stay away from other people, bend the curve, and that's what's necessary. The more you look at it, if we bend the curve, there'll be plenty of medical opportunities for people to get well down the road. But if we don't, and it becomes a big iceberg of people getting sick, that will place too much strain on the medical. And obviously, we want to be kind and courteous to those who are involved on the front lines of the fights. It doesn't hurt to thank your NHS personnel for their efforts. It doesn't hurt to thank your grocer for doing it, or the person bringing the groceries to the grocer. Everybody's in this together. And, you know, I just finished reading a magnificent biography of Winston Churchill written by Andrew Roberts. One of the things that Great Britain and the UK really have going for them is this resilience, this ability to band together in the fight. And this is a war, and I think if we all do it together, we'll come out the other side just as we did in World War II.
Of course, there's been some speculation that the season may resume. It will obviously be delayed from how it was proposed to finish. It may run beyond June. Now, player contracts historically always end on the 30th of June. So Jeremy's next question, has anything yet been discussed around potentially extending player contracts by weeks or months if the league is delayed?
I don't think you could call it a formal discussion. There are discussions being held with the Players Association about that potentiality. I have a feeling it'll all work out. If we finish in June, obviously everything's great. If we get dragged to July or August, there has to be some accommodation. I think with our players, they know that we're here for them and it will work out. But it's still early days for that. 10 days, 2 weeks from now, I suspect we'll be in a lot better position to answer those questions.
And finally, from Jeremy, you've already mentioned, obviously, the funding situation. But do you believe that you might now need further funding from the Trust in the medium and the long term going forward in order to reach your targets and plans?
Well, let's put aside the whole coronavirus situation. I don't think the Trust is going to have to come up with any money, certainly in any short-term basis, to assist us. On the long term, we're still gangbusters to go forward with our plans for radically improving Adams Park, the fan experience and the like. I've talked with the Trust Board, members of the football club's board, about some of those plans, and it's going to involve real money. But we're trying to work through how the Trust can meet its obligation, and yet we can still go forward. I think we'll come to a conclusion that, look, it's going to cost some money. We're talking about anywhere between $3 and $5 million total. And so the Trust's obligation on a $4 million spend is $1 million or £1 million. But here's the good news. Nobody's going to beat them over the head and say you have to pay by Friday. We're going to work with them to try and come up with a way to make it solvable as a financial issue for them and for us.
Now, there were two organisations within the football club who are also affected by the coronavirus outbreak, the Sports and Education Trust. Wycombe Wanderers Ladies have obviously also closed down their operation in this interim period. So questions from John Lavender and Neil Shah, both really relating to the futures of SET and Wycombe Wanderers Ladies, once the coronavirus is over.
Well, let me break it into those two distinct parts. We want to do what we can to keep both of those organizations viable, purposeful, and getting better all the time. In the short term, everybody's we have to put our resources behind keeping the football club viable. And candidly, that's going to make it difficult for us to do much for either of those organizations in the short term. In the long term, both of them form a big part of what we intend to do community-wide. One of Missy and my pet projects is to make sure we're involved with more charities in the community, that the community sees the football team as a big part of it, and that we work together to figure out how we can help each other. You know, the old adage of you can give a person a fish, but it's much better to teach them how to fish. That way they sustain themselves long term. That's going to be a big part of our community involvement with all charities, including SET, including the women's football team.
We've already mentioned the Trust. A question from Mike Peters referencing how the Trust have done amazing work to keep the club ticking over and improving both on and off the pitch. What are your plans to carry this work on and try and keep improving the club?
Well, we've already talked to them. And look, the Trust has two very good members on the football club. Trevor Stroud, obviously, who's been the chairman of the club for the past 3 years, knows the ins and outs. David Cook is probably as well-versed in aspects of the football club as anybody. We talk constantly about how to keep the Trust involved, keep them use the Trust, candidly, make sure we're getting what we can out of the Trust and the Trust gets what it can out of us. I think I would feel more comfortable giving you A, B, and C sort of answer to that once we get through this. Right now, all hands on deck to get through the end of the season, make sure we're financially sustainable, and make sure we're better next year than this.
Mark Hooper has dared to use the word championship His question, is it financially beneficial for us to spend at least one season in the Championship next season, whenever that may be, or is it better for us now to be established Division 1 front runners, gaining promotion in the slightly longer term future?
My opinion, absolutely better to go to the Championship the first opportunity you get. Look, it will be difficult for us, but we've already, before all this outbreak took place, we already had convened a task force to work on it. Dabo, Gareth, Pete, Andrew Howard were tasked by me with doing two things, coming up with two alternatives. One, if we ended up staying in League One next year. The other, if we went to the Championship, what would we need to do to be successful under either eventuality? They have, I guess it was 10 days ago, it feels like a year and a half ago, had just come with their first preliminaries to me. And I am convinced that if we can get to the Championship, we'll figure out how to stay there.
Yeah, Bill McClintock has asked, will the financial resources be available to Gareth to assemble the quality required to give it a real shot at staying in the Championship?
Simple answer is yes. It won't be, and Gareth and I have had long discussions about this, and he's comfortable with this. It's not going to be with us saying, well, let's dig into Couhig's pocket and spend £5 million on a striker. It's going to be, how do we build our budget so that we can spend enough money to be viable in Championship? And look, that's what this rebuild of the stadium's about. That's what the new fiber that we're putting into the stadium would be about. That's what the changeover in personnel in terms of how we're going to marshal our resources will be about. It's so that we can be viable there. We can be sustainable there, because after all, why shouldn't we be there? We deserve it as much as any team. And in fact, I could argue more. We know how to use our resources. We know how to get it to produce results on the pitch, and we can keep doing that.
So that leads on to Adam Robertson's questions. How will you be improving Adams Park to ensure that it becomes a modern football stadium in relation to Wi-Fi, contactless card payments, brand new toilets, etc.?
Well, I have, and I brought it out as a little show and tell. At my last discussions with the members of the board, we are pretty far along the lines of discussing with a company by the name of Landways, instituting a fiber system, an internet system throughout the stadium that will make our club our facility one of the finest in the UK in terms of connectivity, in terms of doing all those things that he has just mentioned. But for all of this, we were set to begin that work the first week of of April, so that we could try it out at our last home game, so we could make the changes we need prior to the next season. That's going to be a little bit jumbled in terms of time, but the only good part of what we're going through is I have a lot of time on my hands back here. We've been talking about how do we rearrange that schedule to get the fiber in, still make it available for next season. Of course, they ask me, when does next season start? And I say, I don't know. So we're working on that. The other half, the clean bathrooms, is part of a much more substantial rebuild of Adams Park Stadium. We have had Acon, one of the top companies in the UK. They did an initial evaluation for us while we were negotiating the purchase. They are coming up with the plans. I think people will be not just pleasantly shocked, they will be very impressed with the upgrades that we're talking about. First, we'll take care of some small aesthetic things. Secondly, we have to, or reverse order. First, we have to take care of some small safety issues, signage issues, and the like. Secondly, some aesthetic things. And third, we have a substantial program to rebuild that part of the stadium to make it more inclusive, to take our Chairboy Village and in effect allow people to come into the stadium much earlier, stay much later, and enjoy the facilities much longer.
Yeah, we said that all questions were on the table. Adrian Bowles had a very specific one about the possibility of introducing a crossbar challenge at half-time, potentially with a cash draw to win the money and a rollover pot if it's not won. And he does make a point about trying to lift the half-time entertainment, which sometimes is seen as quite drab. I mean, in a wider picture of matchday entertainment, there has to be much more than just the 90 minutes, doesn't there?
There really does. And you and I, Matt, have talked about this on innumerable occasions. I start 45 minutes before the game, frankly, I don't find it very exciting to walk in. We're going to change that. I had to ask Pete what the crossbar challenge was. He's explained it to me. He tells me I can put up as much money as I want and have no chance of winning it. So, look, we're going to look at that. The one answer to him I can give is we're going to find a way to make halftime much more exciting. We understand we're in the entertainment business. Our entertainment starts at least 45 minutes before the game. It continues at halftime, and it goes on a couple of hours after the game. We want people coming to Adams Park and saying, that was the best time I've had in a long time. And by the way, the team won.
Alexander Hamilton has a question that I think a few fans have maybe suggested might be on the cards following yours and Missy's and Pete's involvement. Would a pre-season tour abroad be on the cards to help the club brand become more global?
Let me thank Mr. Hamilton for two things. First, for setting up my country, and secondly, for the terrific musical that is in his name. Seriously, it's a small thing in the big picture, but we had planned on announcing our American tour. Pete had arranged it. Gareth and the staff had worked on it. We have it all arranged, and it was to start on July the 1st and go through the 12th, I think. And it was exciting because it brings the worldwide phenomenon worldwide. We have put it on hiatus, not that we don't intend to do it, we just don't know when now. But the more fundamental question, it's a part of our plans going forward to bring the Wanderers, which we consider a worldwide team, worldwide.
And there you go. One last question then from Ralph Bartholomew. Where do you see Wycombe Wanderers in 5 years' time?
I think in 5 years' time, they will be a team that everybody who is a Wanderer fan will be proud of. B, a financially sustainable team. C, a team that is competing at a sustained level, fighting for either promotion or sustainability in the highest league that the fans can support. Whether that's championship or League One, time will tell. I think it'll be championship. Frankly, 5 years from now, Pete and I admit maybe we've had one or two drinks at this time, we talk about why not premiership, but that's way, way distant days.